Just a couple of steps to start to talk about what does resilience mean, because I think it's kind of a term that's for some of us started to feel like sustainability. It kind of gets used and starts to be used more, and supposedly everybody understands what it means, and then you start to realize that everybody's got a different meaning for it. And actually that it's quite closely related to resilience. And so when we started about a year and a half ago to think about resilience, the first conversation internally at the city was, well, what does resilience mean? Isn't it just a subset of sustainability? Because we've been chewing on this sustainability thing now for 10 years. It took us 10 years to think that sustainability was something that we needed to do. So now this new resilience thing is coming forward. It's like environmentally related, right? So it's just a subset of sustainability. So just if you'll play with me for a second, just imagine in your mind, you've got a whiteboard in front of you and you've got this term sustainability and you've got this term resilience. And so is resilience like below sustainability, like it's a subset of that? Or is it something different, like is it next to it? So we were like going back and forth, and so we put sustainability on the board and we thought, well, we'll just give resilience some equal standing for a second. We'll put it next to it. And we'll put circles around each of them. And so maybe there's some circle that kind of goes around both of them. Well, what in the world does sustainability mean? And then, you think about it, what sustainability really means is stability. It's like our effort as a species to create a setting that's relatively stable. Now again, this is not getting at the question of equity in sustainability, like sustainability of what for whom, but let's just assume for a second that equity is for everybody. It's, we as a species, we want things to be relatively stable. I've got a small child. I want to make sure that tomorrow there's food in the refrigerator and there's energy coming through there's stable. Well, that's a reasonable thing for us to want as an individual and as a species. But there's a small problem with that. First premise of life is nothing can avoid change. Right? So you create a world around the notion that it's never going to change, you're in a bit of problem. And in fact, that for many of us who kind of grew up in our careers with sustainability coming forward as kind of like the thing we're all heading towards, it's like, yeah, that sounds great. But there's something missing, and I couldn't put my finger on it. For 20 years, literally, I could not put my finger on what it was about sustainability that made me uncomfortable. Until resilience came forward. Because what does resilience mean? Well, by its classical definition, where it came from in the 70s was the analysis by ecologists of natural systems, looking at what happens when systems are disrupted. When change happens at a level that they cannot keep the status quo. That's what resilience is about. Resilience is about change. And not just the change that's like, oh, I don't like that, so I'm going to adjust a little bit. No, it's just like the change that happens when you get knocked completely off balance. When you get really sick, when suddenly your house is swept away. The question about resilience is what you do then. So then when we realized, back to the whiteboard, here's sustainability, stability. Here's resilience, change. And then we had the circle around them. And I realized, oh, that's what Lao Tzu was talking about 2,000 years ago. You just kind of make the wavy line between them, and it's like, here's the paired twin. You can't actually have stability without change. So the question really for us as a species is how we're going to balance or walk that balance of stability and change. And actually, to me, the arising of resilience is great news because it compels us to start to realize that we cannot create systems that don't change. And then in fact, the more we try to create systems that don't change, we create very increasingly brittle systems so that when they change, they fail. They fail in a big way. So that what we need to be thinking about, and what we're starting to try to think about in the city and the county and all these efforts is, how do we create systems in which we work towards our honest and genuine desire to create stability, and we're prepared for when things get disrupted and they change. So my job in the city as the environmental planner is also to think a lot about climate change. And so I'm usually the guy in the corner that everybody's kind of gone away from in a party because I'm the one who's been talking about, oh man, do you know how bad it is?
Is that true?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and yeah, I'll just share you the kind of things that happen with me during my day. So I was over visiting with James White, who's one of the preeminent climate scientists in our area here recently, and I was describing some things that we were working on and some new framing around this, which I'll get to in a second. And I said, so what do you think about it? And he goes, I think that's right, because you know what the dirty little secret is? We've already lost. We've already lost. We are not stopping climate change. So the good news about that is we're now recognizing that the change is going to happen, and now we're starting to talk about resilience. And the question is how we're going to address that and how we're going to prepare our systems to be more resilient. So I want to also note that the city is actually taking this on in a pretty big way. We applied for and became accepted to the first generation of cities around the world who are part of the 100 Resilient Cities initiative from the Rockefeller Foundation. And part of what came with that, actually, is some funding to hire a new staff person whose job it's going to be to work with not just our city organization, but with all of you and a lot of others to start working on this issue. So his name is Greg Guibert. We just hired him. He's coming on. His first day is tomorrow. So if you have any really important and hard questions about resilience, he's the person to send me to. No, but seriously, so Greg's work is going to focus on that piece. But one of the things that I think has already emerged for us as we've been chewing on this is actually embodied in a slide that Marcus showed you earlier. And it's a really important piece that we searched a long time to try to find some guidance around. And that is, okay, so we're going to have to deal with change. Where do we start? Like, is everything relevant? Or are there some places that you really want to start first? And it was actually when we encountered Marcus's pyramid, we've actually been pushing on it. Originally it was that kind of cone. And we said, how about a pyramid in which there are some things that are foundational? And that I think that they really flow from what they said. If your ecosystems fail, if your energy system fails, if your sewer system fails, if your water system fails, it's cascading failures from there on up. Everything else, while important, is going to become less relevant because your basic systems have failed. And we see this in Boulder. We were both skillful and extremely lucky, as has been mentioned. If our sewer system had failed, which it almost did, if our water systems had run out of energy, which they almost did, then all of us in this room, who may not have been flooded, would have had a very different experience, as the people in Lyons had, as the people in Jamestown had, as others like them have had. So why I'm saying all this is because, as it turns out, I think, we're starting to realize, so my job is to think about how we're going to theoretically stop climate change. Well, okay, now actually we're not going to stop climate change, we're going to actually try to at least keep it from getting a lot worse. So where do we start there? Well, as it turns out, and this is part of what I'm going to end with, is that there's a nexus between how we actually address climate change and how we create a more resilient community. And one of those most important nexuses is energy. The climate problem is fundamentally an energy problem. It's a very simple thing, actually. We have been obscuring it in 10,000 ways, but it's very simple. We're burning fossil fuels, it's creating carbon dioxide, it's heating the environment. Therefore, the solution to climate change is actually very simple too. Not necessarily easy, although easier than we have been led to believe. We need to change to a clean energy system. Well, so here's the point of the resilience. What would you do first in your clean energy system to start addressing this climate change? Well, you would start creating a lot more local renewable energy. And the more local it is, that is to say, if Mary had solar panels on her house and the grid got cut off and Mary's system could separate itself and she had some battery storage, and oh, by the way, she had an electric vehicle, her family could maintain its basic needs around energy and mobility. And the good news is we can actually create a package that makes that whole set of systems available for Mary and the rest of us at about the same cost as we're paying for a car payment and all of our energy payments now. That's a basic insurance policy around resilience that happens to be the way that we could individually participate in solving the climate problem. Similarly, we would want to make sure that all of our basic community services that you don't want to stop, water, sewer, public safety, have their energy systems intact. We would want a microgrid around them, as they did in certain places like Long Island, where they were able to island some places and keep them online. Well, that happens to be actually microgridding. It's a part of the basic pieces of our energy system transition. And finally, I would say, in terms of energy costs, the more local we can create our energy, the more we can actually put that in place here and local, the less we're going to be subject to the kind of price volatility that, believe me, is coming around energy costs that are coming. So I just wanted to show that there are some really interesting nexuses between the conversation of resilience, which is about how we're going to deal with change, and some of these basic conversations we're already having in Boulder about other things that you would think maybe aren't related, but that are actually deeply interrelated. So thanks very much.